Oh, how it comes across has changed. It's a little blue box in the top right-hand corner that says okay instead of got it in the middle of my screen. So Zoom updates. Fun, fun. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Builders Call. We have this call the first and third Tuesdays of each month. And the purpose of it is to create a larger community and collaboration and conversation. John, you've had a pretty big breakthrough that I would love to, if you're open, are you open to having a conversation around what's happened? Okay, fantastic. I think there's some great learning. And so as other people jump on or catch this on the recording, sometimes we have topics, sometimes we have people that we interview, and then a lot of times the conversation is organic based on what people are experiencing in real time. So I'll start off by saying that we had an event that was a leadership event down in Southern California. Oh my gosh, has that been 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago now? 3 weeks ago, maybe. I don't know, time all runs together. And John and I had the opportunity to chat there. And you were, I know that you've had a focus and been, very clear around wanting to build something. And so I would just, for everybody that's on this call, talk about what our conversation was at that event, and then we'll move into what's happened since then.
Sure. So on that thing, I had not had an opportunity to see Casey in a long, long time. So every time I get the chance to do so, I want to not only connect with her, but talk to her and ask her questions because she's a wealth of knowledge. So I was asking and kind of giving her an update on where I am with my agent attraction and revenue share, and then I was a little stuck. But very clear on the fact that I wanted to grow and just looking for ways in which I could. And one of the things, the biggest thing that came out of that conversation with her prior to the event even starting was I was telling her how I had committed to ramping up my phone calls and calling agents. And I said, I'm really taking it now. And we talked about what my process is after that. And I said, well, I've been really trying to, close them myself. And I said I was having some great conversations, and Casey said, "Really? I haven't talked to any of them. So, what's your process?" And the process was I was trying to close everyone myself, and I kind of bypassed the three-way call. So that's one of the big changes that I made.
So what I want to highlight about that conversation is that what is natural and normal is, like, if you go on a listing presentation, like, it's up to you. Nobody else is going to come in and close that deal. Like, you've got to get it done. You've got to get them to buy you. And that's true in most every aspect, right? Particularly when you're talking about sales and influence, it is about you. It's about your ability to connect with that person. It's about your ability to determine what their needs are through a need analysis. It's about your ability to position yourself as an authority and as a resource for them, and to show them how aligning with you, working with you is going to help them get what it is that they want. Good morning, Cindy Keithley. Welcome to our call. And so that is quite often done, like, that is a solo game, right? Nobody's coming to save you on a listing appointment and get you that deal. Like, you sink or swim, you got to get it done. And so this idea and this conversation around agent attraction and building and utilizing influence to do that it's a really different conversation. And so this piece of, like, there's no question in my mind, John, that you know how to do all of those things. You know how to build relationship, you know how to determine needs, you know how to present yourself as somebody that's an authority on something, and as a person that's going to be a resource to help someone get something. But the whole agent attraction conversation it's a different conversation, because when we have relationships with whoever that person is, there is this thing that happens when there's like 1 degree of separation, where you have somebody that is reinforcing you on your behalf so that you don't have to position yourself like that, and the ability for someone to come in and have a conversation that maybe you wouldn't even have, because you wouldn't be that direct with that person, because you're emotionally attached to the decision that they're going to make about joining you or not joining you. And then this idea of having someone else in the conversation now, there's things that are key about that. Number one, you have to like trust that person with your relationship, right? Of like, oh my goodness, if I'm going to bring someone else into the conversation, I wanted to support it and to move it forward. And so there's a level of trust that has to happen there to know like, man, if I put this person on a call, they're not going to be like, well, I was thinking about it and now I'm totally not because I didn't like that person. Right. So there, there's that comes into play, like all of these pieces of it. But that is where, and the anatomy of a third party validation conversation that you guys can find on YouTube and Brent Gove's website is when you understand how to do those and how to do them at a high level. If someone knows that process, then it's impossible to go wrong in sticking somebody in front of your people, right? So John, you're not unusual in the fact that you were attempting to do it on your own, because I don't know how many times I talk to people that are wanting to grow or wanting to grow faster, and I'm like, yeah, I haven't met your people, not talking to your people. And so it's a different reason for each person as to why they wouldn't be using the third party validation call or multiple third party validation calls with different people. What was yours?
My reason for not doing it,
Yeah.
I felt it wasn't a matter of trust so much that I couldn't trust the other person. It was more, I just felt like I should be able to do this. I should be able to close this. I've got the relationship, so I know what I want to say. And that was really holding me back. And I can tell you the biggest aha moment came after. So I ended up scheduling a third party validation call with Casey, and after the call, we set another call with, we set a next step. The next step was for the prospect to fill out the application, which she did. So it was a very successful call. But my biggest aha came with something that you said, Casey, is they have to buy you. And what they were trying to do, even though I had a relationship with them, I'm trying to sell them on me. Join me, join me, join me. They're not seeing anything else other than, oh, I'm just joining with John. And I have to do a huge sales job, even though I already know them, to sell them on why they want to partner with me. But when I brought Casey into it, I wasn't selling myself. I was selling a team. I was selling resources. I was selling partnership. And that was the biggest aha that I had. After that was so easy because I didn't have to sell myself. Just she, meaning the prospect, saw there was this collaboration, there was this partnership, and she saw she wasn't just joining John, she was joining John, she was joining Casey, she was joining all the possibilities. So it's just a way easier sale.
I love that. And what I also love about it is that within days of us seeing each other and having that conversation, you had an appointment on my calendar. Right. So I just like when I'm talking to people and I'm having people ask themselves that are frustrated about the results or wanting better results, like rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How willing are you to learn, to grow, and to change? And most people will rank themselves high on learning. They'll rank themselves pretty high on growing, but changing is where a lot of people have, a rating that's lower, because changing what we're doing, even if it's going to bring something better, is still change, right? So I want to acknowledge you for being willing to like jump in and change and do something different, and highlight that this particular relationship was like a lifelong relationship of somebody that wasn't like that you were newly building a relationship with, right? Connected with Elizabeth and you for literally years and years and years and years and years and years
Right.
and years, right? And so sometimes those are those are the ones that, like, particularly if somebody knows you over years or a lifetime, it's like, it's John. Right? It's Elizabeth. Yeah, I know you guys. I'm sure it's great if you say it's great, right? But that you don't have as much influence in that. So the what I want to acknowledge you for is, as well, I know that you watched the how to have a successful third party validation call based on what happened when that call started, which was specifically, and you would be surprised, maybe you wouldn't be surprised, on how many times people will get on calls and introduce me first. And when they introduce me first, I know that they haven't watched that training, or they haven't absorbed the training, right? And so the anatomy of what makes that call and that such a powerful tool and resource is there's a reason for every single aspect of how it's done, the way that it's done, right? And so in the clearing of the time that we had 30 minutes together, because I had another three-way call at the bottom of the hour, to introducing her first and edifying her first, and then keeping the edification on me tight and meaningful, to then hand the call off, set a really great energy and foundation. And like, if you guys were to have been on that call with us, and I do what I normally do, which is, outside of what John shared with me, what would you like me to know about you, meeting you for the first time? Energetically, she was still like, she was sharing, but she was like, and what would be most meaningful, she was still a little apprehensive. And then she said, well, I want to know, kind of like what your experience has been or your story has been. And so I knew that it was important in that I have 10,000 hours, over 10,000 hours of third-party validation calls in my career. So I know how to read people, I know how to read their energy, and she was looking to have just enough where she could buy into me, to view me as a credible resource without going, too much into that. And after that, like, her posture changed, how she was sitting in her chair changed, where she went in the conversation. Like, she shared stuff that she hadn't shared before, and we had rapport, by 15 minutes into the call, that was really solid. And then we had, a meaningful time together for the duration of that. And so she was willing to set a next step on the other side and actually take action and move forward. So I would encourage everybody, if you haven't reviewed the third-party validation training of the anatomy of a third-party validation call and the power of it, and you haven't reviewed that in a while, it's a really great thing to review. And it's also something that you can use outside of attraction and recruiting. You can use it when you're with buyers and sellers, and how you position the team that you work with. Right? If you're not on a sales team, you have a team of resources like a listing coordinator or a transaction coordinator. Like, you have the ability to edify and lift the people that you are working with, to create, influence and a feeling that people are going to be cared for and that their needs are going to be cared for. John, anything else that you would add about the experience or things that you learned in that?
I will say the third party validation, the anatomy of the call and the intro was, I mean, it just sets the tone. It tees it up so well. And I've done it both ways. And when I've done it like, hey, this is Casey, it doesn't work as well. There's just this awkwardness. And I've done third party validation calls for my agents. And when they'll sit there and just say, this is John. And it's just very awkward. Then you have to like find some way to connect and build rapport and tell them who you are. And it goes so much smoother when you do that. And it takes a minute and a half, 2 minutes to do. And it's just a great way to kick off the.
So I want to give an example of what happens when it goes sideways, because I just had that happen as well within the last couple of weeks. Is there was somebody that was, that has been like, yes, I'm coming to EXP, and been in that conversation. It was, a conversation that he was in with Rick, as far as back to October, right? And on that same trip to Southern California, John, I was able to get in front of him, like, face to face on my way home. And he's like, yeah, I have like 3 other agents that want to come to EXP with me as well. And I was like, great, let's get them on a call today. So as we were sitting there, he texted them, 3 of them, 2 of the 3 got on a Zoom at 4 o'clock that day, that same day. And we all got on the call, and everybody's on the call, and I didn't have a conversation with him beforehand. So this is, I dropped the ball in this context of like what that process would look like. And obviously I didn't send him that to watch. It was like, great, we're going to, keep the conversation going. And based on what I know of him, he wouldn't have watched it before that call anyway. And so, in hindsight, it's like, always looking at what could improve, like to start training him immediately on that. So we get on the call, and everybody's on the call, and he's like, hey, this is Casey. And then, then the other, the people that were on the call. So I knew that that was not going to happen. I gave a pause enough for like to know that that was not going to happen. So what I know going into that conversation is I have no credibility and I have no influence because I haven't been teed up, right? And they don't know me from anyone. And for me to talk about myself in that way is going to be not effective, right? And so what I know going into a conversation when that hasn't happened is that I've got to take that conversation and direct it in a way where I build rapport immediately. I edify the person that's bringing them to the conversation and create some kind of structure or direction for that conversation so that we can have a conversation. And so what happened in that conversation is, I just said, hey, clearly, based on the fact that this morning we were sitting having coffee together, and now in that conversation, I said, well, let's set up a conversation. And here we are, and it's 4 o'clock of the same day, and we're all in a conversation. Clearly, I'm not going to mention the person's name, has influence and credibility with you such that you would be willing to take your time and jump on this call today. So I want to acknowledge that relationship and that credibility, right? That's how I started the call, which I'm elevating intentionally now and lifting the person that is bringing them to the conversation, right? And so, and then moving into the next piece of that, which is, tell me about, what had you guys jump on the call today? And then finding out what do you know and what do you want to know more about. So before anything having to do with me, I've got to get a point A. And when you're in conversation managing different people, it's like, oh, what they know versus what they think they know versus why they're here, and get a feel, get a feel for that. Because sometimes people will tell you one thing, and then what comes out of the actual prospect's mouth is going to be something entirely different. So I like to do like that reset and just get clear out of their mouths, what that is. So what ended up, and why I'm telling you this story is because that call ended up going 45 minutes. It filled in the gaps with both of them. And the next steps for both of them were to set appointments to do their ICAs the next day after an initial meeting. So things can move really quickly when you master the third-party validation process and you're the person doing the third-party validation call, for people in your organization, even if it goes sideways in the beginning in the setup for whatever reason. And so I know that we've got a couple of people that are on the call today that have experience in doing that. And we'd just love to open up this part of the conversation to anything that you guys would add based on your experience.
I'll add one last thing is it's important as you've talked about to have a next step, and sometimes that evolves within the call. But I always try and go into the call knowing what I want that next step to be. So I can, do something up for that. It does evolve, but it's just helped me in terms of knowing that there's a goal at the end of it. Obviously the end goal is always to, get them to sign an ICA, but that might not be that next step. And so in my mind, I've always got like some type of next step that will be helpful to move the ball forward.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to add to that because there's an exception that we haven't talked about, and it's like ninja influence attraction. So I'd had a conversation with Selena about something in our process, and we didn't have a date and time on a next step on something. And so I just like went, listen, till we get, never end a conversation without the next thing on the calendar, blah, 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 blah. And then she put me on a third-party validation call with a prospect of hers, and I didn't do that. So I immediately picked up the phone after the call and called her to tell her why, because it was done on purpose. So for those of you, and I know Jay and Will, probably you guys have a lot of experience with this, and Cindy too, is with DISC and behavioral styles. The person that we were on the call with was a super high D. which I love because then we can just be bottom line and cut to the chase, and there doesn't need to be any frills or fluff or relationship building. And you know, a high D is just an entirely different conversation. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have to use any of my tools. I can just be myself because I'm talking to myself, right? So you know, we had a good laugh at that at the beginning of the call, but when it got to the end of the call, how I left it was we were leaving him with something that he was going to go look at, and I said something about putting, you know, a next conversation in place on the calendar, or leave it with him and then he could get back to us if he wanted to continue the conversation. I would never do that with somebody that was not a high D, but I did it with the person that was a high D because I want him to be controlling the process. So, and immediately it was like a slingshot that came back, and he's like, no, let's get something on the calendar for, like, you know, and it was just a couple of days from then. And there was no hesitation about setting up a next conversation. So I was using that to gauge interest and create a pull energy versus me pushing and driving the conversation and making sure we have a next step, a date and time on the calendar, and that there's no gap in that, right? And so there's times where strategically, in that instance, if he had said, oh yeah, leave it with me and I'll get back to you, I know that he's not that interested, and there's no amount of chasing or, you know, fancy footwork that I'm going to do in my end on a conversation to change anything about where he's at, because that's where he's at. So there are, you know, there are exceptions to everything in the context of being strategic, right? And so that when we talk about, you know, never leaving a conversation with the next step, without a next step, that is a nuance. It's called, in coaching, it's called the full give or the full takeaway. So the full give is like when you just give it to someone and just be like, whatever. And in our conversation, when he was like, yeah, but this, but that, but this, but that, I'm like, what? Sounds like it's not for you, which is a takeaway. I've now taken it away. And now he's back in the conversation. So there's different layers of skills when it comes to conversations and influence with people. But what is unanimous throughout all of those is being completely neutral and unattached to what someone decides. Right. So I have zero attachment to what he's going to decide. And I actually told him that in the conversation. I said, if you come into our organization based on the level of like 48 transactions a year, it's going to mean a couple of $1,000s to me. That's not going to change my life each year, but it really could make a big difference for you and yours, right? I'm able to say that because I have zero attachment to him joining the organization. I know that it's going to be a great thing for him if he does, but my life's not going to be dramatically different if he doesn't. And again, that's something I would say to somebody that's a very high D. I wouldn't say that to somebody that's a high I or a high S because of wanting to be part of a community and wanting to feel needed and wanting to feel a part of something. I would never say that to somebody with that behavioral profile. But for somebody that's a high D, absolutely all day long, because what I want to communicate is, we don't need you, right? This is not a conversation of need. This is a conversation of value and being able to bring something, you know, that could be great for you in ways that you're not aware of right now. So, questions, comments, feedback, thoughts. You're stealing that, Joseph, or Joseph.
I'm gonna steal it too.
Mental
You can
note.
steal it too. It's
Already-
all the delivery. I botched the delivery the first time I said that years ago, and it was bad. It was really bad. It's like I was the B word. It was with a capital B too. I'm like, because I said it, I think it was my face. I'm like, my life's not going to change if you know, but yours could. Like, it was very obnoxious. So you got to make sure that your delivery is neutral. Yes, neutral delivery on that is important.
I like obnoxious.
And that's because you're spicy.
So, you know, the game changers for me have been, one, the intro, you know, what's there in this conversation, or, you know, what would you love to leave with, you know, this conversation with. But the major game changers at the end, because it used to get awkward at the end with the follow-up, and then asking them, what would you like to see next? What would you like to see happen next? And giving them those three options Game changer.
And so when you talk about 3 options for people that maybe don't know about that on this call.
You know, I would ask them, do they want to see what the community is like? Do you want to join our Monday morning mastermind? You know, is that a next step? Would you like to see behind the curtain and see EXP world, you know, or would you like to set up another conversation so you can get another perspective?
Yeah, so the psychology of when someone doesn't know and offering them 3 things, if you offer someone 2 choices, it's automatically survival and fight or flight because, oh my gosh, what if I choose the wrong one? Right? So subconsciously that's what happens. But when you offer people 3 choices, it doesn't matter which one they pick because you're offering them, and one of the 3, they're going to move themselves forward, but it neutralizes any energy of being pinned in a corner or ultimatum, or you can do this or you can do that. And it totally takes it away when you have those 3 things. And those 3 things are going to be different conversation to conversation, person to person. And so it's up to us to know and be listening, like what would be the 3 most meaningful options that I could offer someone based on what I've learned about them in this conversation, what I know, such that it would be like, and they could pick multiples, right? So they may go, oh, you know, let's do this. They may pick one, or they may pick a couple of options, in which case, if you hadn't offered, you would have never known that those would have been things that they would pick. So I think of it, you know, I think of it like a menu, right? It takes real presence to be listening, to be able to discern what could be the most 3 meaningful options for that individual, and not just like what a meaningful option I would feel would be, which is, well, let's get your ICA going, right? That may not be, and that could be one of the options, right? However, it may not be the one that they're, you know, ready to walk into next. So love that. Anyone else?
Just added a HGTV star to the group.
I saw that Joseph tagged me, and I could see it's coming out of Oklahoma. It looks like.
No, LA.
Oh, LA. All right. There was something about Oklahoma in the in his post. Maybe it was another one. I could be confused. It's not, it wouldn't be the first time.
Nashville. I think it was Nashville.
Oh,
Nash-
Nashville. Yeah, Nashville. So let's talk about edification for a minute while we're on this, you know, topic of third-party validation. I would like to have 3 people right now. So just if this is you, volunteer and take yourself off mute and say it in 30 seconds or less. If you were going to edify me, what you would say about me, and then I want to give you feedback on the edification on effective or could be more effective. So there's no wrong, it won't be a wrong, but I want to be in the practice of it because I think there's some huge learning just based on a lot of calls I've been on lately and what I've been experiencing in edification. So who, if you were introducing me on a third-party validation call and edifying me, what would you say?
I would say, and as much as I respect Casey for her business acumen, she's got a business outside of EXP, she got a business inside of EXP, very successful at it. What I respect most about her is her commitment to personal growth and development. And I see that in everything she does and the way she tries to connect and communicate with people.
Cool. So thank you for being willing to jump in the deep end of the pool and go there, John. What do you guys think about that edification? As you heard it. Imagine if you were on a call and he introduced me. This would be where you come off mute. There's no wrong feedback.
I hear you. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I guess we need to do a better job of connecting how that is valuable to the person hearing it.
Okay. So, there's a couple, one of the things he used in his language, so like, respect, or admire. If you go to the third-party validation training, what I like about so-and-so, what I respect about so-and-so, what I admire about so-and-so. So he used that. So in the context of thinking about a prospect being on the other end, if they are somebody that is driven by a high level of competence, and that's important to them, that would be effective to know that John has respect for me, right? But if there's somebody that's just all about care and community and that, it may not land as much for them. Because that's not going to be their initial driver, right? Their initial driver may be so by way of example, if somebody's got care as their initial driver, like a super high S or an IS, you guys know what I mean when I'm talking about that in behavioral styles with the disc. If you don't, come off mute and ask. Is that that relationship and community is going to be key. So like, it could be something that, it could be something along the lines of, well, I have a lot of respect and admiration for Casey or whatever, that one of the things that stands out to me is her level of care of people and the people that she leads through multiple organizations and, both here in the United States and globally.
Well,
So,
it's interesting. Sorry to cut you off, but it's interesting, Will, that you say that, because as I'm thinking about it, I'm realizing I was saying what I wanted to say about Casey, but even factoring into how that might impact or influence the other person. So it makes me think, okay, like just because I want to say that about Casey, it may not be relevant to this person, and maybe there's something I can think about before the call to make it tie in more so they can connect more to the validation as opposed to just something I want to say about her.
Yeah, and this is making me think more because it seems like, again, like you said, the edification, every time you talk to Casey or every time I would do a call with Rick, I would kind of edify him the same way. It sounds like that needs to change per person and per personality.
so here's what I notice a lot of people do. They go to like a bio of, been in real estate since 2005, built a business in network marketing, for blah, blah, blah. Like, it's a bio. And while that is interesting, it's not really relevant. I mean, if you're putting me on a phone call with somebody that is like huge, has been huge in the direct sales industry, then that's relevant. But if that person hasn't been huge in the direct sales industry, the fact that I've succeeded at a high level there is going to be totally irrelevant to them. So like, mentioning that, like, why would we mention that, right? There's no impact for the person that is the prospect. But if you were, you could position that differently and just say something like, she has over 15 years of building teams locally and globally, and internationally. And so understands people and how to help entrepreneurs grow and succeed, and get to the next level. Okay, right? That could be a more relevant way to versus like, so why I'm having this conversation is about just like thinking and being intentional, because a lot of times we just talk to talk or say things, and while those things are true, is it going to be the most effective for the person that we have in that conversation? And when you think about edification and you think about a golf tee and you put the ball on the tee so that when you go and swing, it can go the furthest, like really thinking in an edification conversation, what is going to be the tee up that's going to allow this person to go the furthest in this conversation? And the same thing when introducing a prospect. Sometimes it is, there could be, here's what they're about and what they do. Great. But now where's the personal part of that about what I like, respect, or admire about them as a person, right? Because the edification process, if you think about it, is to bring any walls down. And when you hear things that are true, that are meaningful, and that are stated with intention, walls come down and connections are made. And so I think that, it takes time before walking into a conversation to go, what am I going to say that is going to be the most meaningful, so that I can get the furthest and create the maximum amount of value in the conversation or in the time that we're going to have together, right? So I'm thinking, like, as I'm looking at Will, if I'm going to introduce and edify Will, what I would say to him, because I'm thinking, like, or just edifying him in a conversation with his prospect, is that there's some key things I know about Will, but maybe how I present them or how I say them is going to matter to the person that he's brought to the call, right? So yes, he does an incredible amount of business, so he's competent, right? And yes, he's willing to learn and grow and do new things, which 3 years ago, the Will of 3 years ago was not on social media in the way that he's on social media today. But what does that mean for you? What that means for you is that you're linking arms with somebody who's learning based, who's committed to growing, and regardless of where you want to grow in your career, you're in a community of people that are going to do that. So it's taking those things about Will that I could say that are true, right? Those things are true in saying them about him. But if I anchor that to what it's going to mean for the person, right, and put that connection, that may or may not be something that they connect and that they make personal about the value of them working with Will. So when I'm doing a third-party validation conversation and edifying who that, sponsor is going to be in that conversation, those are important things as well. And, Rick was like great at edification, which is why everybody felt so, he always found great things to say about people and noticed those things and was looking for those things about people, which is why pretty much without exception, if you talk to anyone that knew him, they'd say, oh, he made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. And, he cared so deeply. Well, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But what was true is that in that conversation or in that experience of that person, he was looking for, searching for the thing that was going to be true based on his experience with them, and a thing that if he verbalized and could bring to the surface of that conversation, that it would be very meaningful and create meaning for that individual. He was a master at that, right? And so that is what effective edification does, right? When, and it could be, okay, I'm not going to go into that example because it was an example that went sideways. He complimented somebody on how they looked, like, oh, you look great today. And the person got offended and said, don't ever do that again. Right. And like brought the husband into the conversation. Like, don't ever comment about how I look. Okay. Oops. Right. But the person did look great that day. So it's like being able to identify, connect with, with people and what's going to be meaningful for them. So who else would like to give, like, if you were going to edify me in 30 seconds or less in a conversation on a call, now taking all of this into like consideration, now what would you say? Based on what you know about me, based on my experience, your experience of me, and based on the principles that we've talked about.
One thing I always do is I always introduce you as a person that helped me in the beginning. So, I say, hey, especially if they're interested in agent attraction, I say coming off, when I got here, I was green, but from day one, I worked with Casey, and she gave me the skill set, and the mindset skill set to grow what I've grown so far. So I owe a lot of that to her.
So that's a great point. And here's why. Because nobody can ever dispute your personal experience. And when you use your personal experience in the context of value and what it's meant for you, that is one of the most powerful ways to edify. And if you said nothing else outside of that, and you handed the call over in the context of edification, it's be brief, be brilliant, be gone. What's going to be the most meaningful thing that I can say or share about this person that's true, that's going to have impact as I bring them into this conversation. So anytime that you're edifying someone and you can do it off of personal experience, that in that there's for the person who leads with competence and cares about results, it's covered in what you said, Will, and in the person who is going to lead with care and community and being taken care of and being a part of something, it also is going to hit that audience. Love that. So I'm always thinking as well, like, for all the third-party validation calls and all the conversations, a lot of times things just roll out of my mouth. And, we always say it's not necessarily the words you say, it's how they're said. But in thinking about this, it's also the words that you say, right? It's also the words that you say. So in, a lot of the third-party validation calls that I do where people want to know, well, what's your story or what's your experience been? A lot of that is talking about the fact that I wasn't in this experience for the first, 3.5 years. It's really just been the last 4. And why? So now I'm telling Rick's story, but I'm telling his story and how it would relate to the person. So if they're, a brand new agent, they're not going to care that he owned 9 Keller Williams offices and that ultimately he was in the industry 43 years. That means nothing, right? Unless it's an agent that's been in the industry and made, multiple changes to different places, then it might be, so where that conversation did come into play recently was with somebody that I ran into when I was in Utah. And she's thinking about getting a real estate license. And she said, I have 2 people that are after me to get my real estate license. I said, 2 different people, really? She goes, I said, are they in the industry? And she said, yeah. And I said, what company are they with? She goes, they're both with Keller Williams, but they're with different Keller Williamses. And so what I was able to say to her in that moment was, that's a great company. That's where I started out. And actually, my husband used to own 9 of their franchises. Thank God the last 9 years he didn't. And if you want to be really strategic with your real estate career and what's possible for you to create and understand what those differences are, I'm happy to have a conversation with you to help educate you based on what you want to get out of your career and what's available to you as an agent. And she was like, oh yeah, I'd love to know that. Right. So I have edified the Keller Williams experience, but then I've also repositioned it based on the credibility of Rick, right? And what his experience was and why he wouldn't have changed anything about where he actually ended up based on the impact that it's had. Right. So and that was enough, right? I've got to create the curiosity to want a further conversation and leave it in that space. So the words that we choose matter, how we say it matters. And so would love to know what you guys are walking away with in the context of edification and how you maybe are thinking about it differently now.
Well, for me, is just as I said, I was saying truthful things that meant something to me, but really saying something to say something, as opposed to really thinking about what's going to be the most impactful to move this conversation forward for this person and how I can relate my edification to that.
I'm newer to the game, so I took like a lot of notes and got a lot of value out of it. But I think one of the things I get to implement right away that hasn't been said was that nobody can dispute your personal experience. So creating something that's true and something that's impactful for all the different personality types. And if I can kind of blend 2 into 1, then that would be like an ultimate win. So that way I can have something that's succinct, powerful, be brief, be brilliant, and be gone.
But also that and again, this goes back to the work that Casey and I did in the beginning. Your personal story is the most powerful thing you have, because no matter what they think about EXP or what they've heard about EXP, they can't dispute your personal story.
Yeah. So when I think about like, how many people did you recruit to KW? Remind me.
Over 90 in 7 months. It was like 93 to be exact.
93 in 7 months.
Who's
So-
counting?
So I mean, there's things that are very clear. You had a belief in what you were doing. You had a vision for what you were doing. You felt like it was going to be good for those people, and you were doing it from a place of, doing it from a place of service, right? So all of those things were in place. And so there was a high level of care and also a high level of competence. I mean, if we break down the DISC, so Alicia said she didn't know what DISC is. DISC is an assessment that identifies different behavioral styles or communication styles that go with that. So if you do just really simplify it, it's competence and sincerity. Like if you were to roll DISC into one thing, and the levels of competence and sincerity in each one of those DIS and C is what leads and what follows, and to what extent, right? So when you think about what you're communicating in your experience and in your story, it could be really powerful for you to say, listen, I'm somebody of integrity, and when I have a vision and a passion, I'm going to go execute it. And based on results, I had a vision and I had a passion, because in the course of 9 months, I used my influence to bring, X number of people to Keller Williams, right? But based on the fact of integrity and vision, I was doing the best I knew how to do based on what I knew at that time. And then I learned what was actually possible and what was available. So based on my integrity, I made a very difficult decision, which was to change, right? Solely based on my integrity and catching a vision that I knew was going to be and bring more than I could have brought previously, right? And so now we're in a conversation that's like, well, what's the more, right? And how did those, those pieces come together? And so it's really powerful to be able to take, like when you're telling a story, it's not about that there was anything wrong or bad there. It's just more about, you have the opportunity every time you tell your story to anchor the things, the care and the competency, right? As you're speaking to people, when you tell that story of, like, it's not easy. I mean, imagine like you could, knowing what you know today, be like, oh my gosh, I misled these people, right? And it's not that at all. It's that you had a vision and you were aligned with it and integrity, and based on that, like you were able to create that there because of what you knew and what that would mean for those people. And then because you're somebody that's committed to learning and growing and being your best, you learned and grew and realized, oh my gosh, more is possible. I have a responsibility, while it's going to mean change, which is uncomfortable on my part, to be in integrity with who I am as a man and a leader, to do that. Not easy at all. And yet, here I am, because I know what that end product is going to be now for the people that are going to be recipients of being in a conversation with me as it relates to their business and their life.
Sweet. I love it. Thank you.
Yes, and we've got the recording, because if you're asking me what I just said, I have no idea, but that's what I felt in the moment, so it came out.
I was taking notes. I got it. But also watch the recording too.
Yeah, so here's one thing that I would leave everybody with on this call. Before you get on a three-way call the next time, be really clear before you walk into that conversation. What's the most powerful way to edify your prospect? And be intentional with it. What are going to be the things that you choose to say about them in a blend of competence and in sincerity, based on what you know about them? For those of you guys that are, really well-versed in DISC, you can think about it in a different level. But for those of you that don't know that, just think about what you know about that person and what's going to be the most meaningful thing for them to hear about themselves from you, which is not necessarily going to be a run through of their bio. It might be a little bit of, yeah, they've been around this long and they're a top producing agent, and that's great. But what I like, respect, and admire most about them is XYZ. And what is going to be the meaningful thing that you say about them in that introduction that is going to build value for the relationship that you have with them, even if they get off the phone and this is not the direction they go in, that you've built value. And then also being really clear. So if there's one thing, I love Will's example. If there's one thing that you guys want to say that would want to say about me, like if I was giving you something to say for an introduction or edification for me, It could be that I've spent over 30 years as an entrepreneur, and so I understand the business person's mind, and I've done it and succeeded at a high level in multiple industries. And within this organization, I'm all about helping people transform their businesses and their lives to help them get to the next level. Not grow, transform, like change shape, right? And so in that, we don't need that years in real estate or this or that. It's just like, oh, wow, okay. It's enough, like, and that is a very simple introduction and edification. That's 20 seconds. That's enough about me. And I can jump into a conversation and give somebody an experience where they'll create their own, opinions on that. So, I like that everything that I've done is about transformation, period. Right? And what is that going to mean for you? That's going to mean that if you want to change shape, like literally transform your business, your life into something that you haven't yet experienced, like this is the person that you want to talk to, because whether we're in a conversation about real estate or your marriage, I'm a resource for that. Not that I want marriage counseling, coaching, but you get the point. Okay, fantastic. So we've got a few minutes left before the top of the hour. Any just leftovers, thoughts, comments, questions?
Any company
What if
that may not have trickled down to us?
Okay, one at a time. Will, go, and then Jay.
I said any company updates that may not have trickled down to us in the world of attraction.
No, the only company update I would say is the VIP tickets for convention are 25% sold out. And that as they're releasing the rooms and the room blocks, some of them are walking distance and a lot of them are not. So October convention for EXP, I would definitely encourage you guys to get yourselves dialed in with your tickets and your accommodations, and the same thing for anybody that you're going to be bringing. On that, I would say that's the biggest kind of company thing right now to plan for, right? It seems like we're a long ways out, but it'll be here before you know it.
And hey guys, if anybody sees anything about Cabo rooms, let me know. I waited to the last minute. So
real quick, they just sent out a new email. They've extended it to February 8th. I think February 8th, they've extended the room block. They just sent the email out because I just sent it to a couple of people saying, hey, I know you guys were still on the fence, but hang on, it just went to February 9th. The room block is open. So if you did not get that email, let me know. It just came out.
yeah, and I know somebody that has two more. I just bought 2 tickets yesterday at the 300. So I've got 2 for 600. And I know he had 2 more yesterday. So if anybody else needs 2 tickets, I can refer you to that gentleman. Jay Street.
Yes, sir. I was just going to ask, if you don't know the person that well, do you have any strategies? Would you just look at their social media, or maybe talk to somebody else, like another coworker? What would you do if you don't know the person that well?
So if you don't know the person that well, if you ask somebody what they would say about themselves, they're like never going to tell you anything. So here's how you get out of them. So for people that know you the best, what would they say about you? And so that is a way to third party, like, oh, people that know me best would tell you this, that, the other, but they would never tell you that themselves. If you said, tell me about you, they're not going to tell you that, right? So people that know you best, what would they say about you?
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. And if you listen to what those things are, they'll generally come out really quick. And then you can use what those things are to anchor value in the conversation you're having and help connect those dots. So, by way of example, if somebody said, you are, I have a high level of integrity. Well, fantastic. Like, how's that going to be applicable here? Is because that you'll understand that when you have something in your hand that could be a game changer for someone else, it's in integrity for you to share, right? And how you work that into what you're going to do and be a part of, because that's who you are, right? As a person. And so sometimes it's just connecting those pieces, and those are important things to listen for and then be able to use to help lift and to elevate and put pieces together for people in those conversations.
Sweet, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You are welcome. All right, fantastic. So the recording for this, we will label it as third-party validation, transformation, and high-level edification. So we have something to come back to that we when we've got it in our YouTube playlist for people that want to revisit this. John, again, want to acknowledge you for being transparent, being willing to share for the benefit of everybody learning today, and to be somebody who, in the context of willing to learn, willing to grow, and willing to change, is a 10 based on results. And so that is a for sure, always a for sure way to unstick yourself when stuck in any aspect, is to go like, oh, I'm an 8. Okay, great. I'm going to choose to be a 10 and then go execute. So kudos
you.
to you on that, and congratulations to your organization continuing to grow as a result. That's always what there is to do. And thank you everyone else that contributed to the conversation today and was willing to dig into some of the key principles that are really important, that there's a lot of depth around. Until you get into it and have a conversation like this, that depth can be missed at times. So appreciate you all, and make it a great rest of your day.
Yeah.